Hey, welcome back inside another edition of TinChattin, everyone, here at Parkview Field, alongside my main man, Mike Moss, play-by-play voice of the Fort Wayne Tin Caps. My name is Peter Hood. Appreciate you making us a part of your Friday night. And Mike, I guess the theme of the week is missed opportunities. Last time you and I spoke, the Tin Caps were playing good baseball. They were in a position where they were, about 5 games back of the South Bend Cubs, going to South Bend with an opportunity to make up ground. They couldn't do it. And now you're in a position where you've lost a series against South Bend. You're trying to salvage a series on the road against Lansing before you come back home. And now 6 games back of a playoff spot as time winds down here in the regular season.
I'm wondering, Peter, and I know we've talked about this in times past. These are young guys. And we've mentioned it many a time, youngest team in the Midwest League every year since 2014. And we've been spoiled by the previous couple of years with the likes of a Fernando Tatis Jr. and Nick Margevicius and some others. The success rate, making the postseason 2 years ago, missing out by 1 game on the final day of the season last year. These guys are not quite as talented. All have lots of potential. And I really wonder, coming down the stretch here the last 2 or 3 weeks, you and I have talked about the fact, yes, the team would like to make the playoffs for the 9th time in 11 years. But it just seems for every 2 feet forward, they go 1 step backwards. And it was a rough series over in South Bend. The Tin Caps did salvage 1 of the 3 games, had the lead in 2 of the 3 games, got a couple of good starts. And unfortunately, it was a case either the bullpen couldn't quite hang on to the lead or the offense just couldn't muster the needed hit when they had to have one. And then they lose 2 nights ago in Lansing, and that was frustrating. Last night, though, we've talked a couple of weeks ago, I used the term consistently inconsistent, and we saw that in evidence last night. After being beaten the night before in Game 1 of the game series at Lansing, they get the offense going. They got a solid start from Efrain Contreras, and they won 12-4, belted out 13 hits. And so every time you think, okay, they're down for the count, 8, 9, 10, ding, 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 they come back with a solid performance. Mathematically, they're not eliminated yet. Starting play tonight, 6 games behind South Bend, 5 games behind Lansing, and those are the 2 teams that the Tin Caps have got to catch. They're tied with Dayton. They are ahead of West Michigan. Bowling Green, which comes to town tomorrow. They have the top spot in the second half. They're actually tied with Great Lakes for the best record in the East in half number 2. But the Tin Caps have a chance. They have a pulse. They have a heartbeat. They have gotten some very good starting pitching since you and I talked last. Omar Cruz, we talked about him. Efrain Contreras. Cohen Dana is getting the ball tonight. And when our viewers see this, you'll be able to tell them, hopefully, some good news. Ryan Weathers has pitched well his last time out. So it's just a case, the phrase now or never has never meant so much as it means to the Tin Caps over this last 2+ weeks of the season.
Yeah, and you mentioned yesterday's 12-4 win. Obviously, good to see them bounce back the way that they did in Lansing. And one of the guys who was one of the stars of the show, if you will, Blake Hunt. And I feel like we haven't, mentioned his name a whole lot this season. He's not the flashiest of players, not the highest rated of prospects on this team. But, Mike, if you look at it, really struggled in his first month and a half or so here. But in his last 50 games, he's sitting just shy of 300, couple homers, 20 knocked in, had a couple more knocked in yesterday to go along with 3 hits. And he's a guy who's really progressed in his time here in Fort Wayne. No?
Yeah, if you remember, Peter, in his first 35 games, he was batting below the Mendoza line. And for the viewers that don't know what the Mendoza line is, it's 200.
That's my career Little League batting average.
Mario Mendoza, longtime American League infielder, and it's named after him. But Blake was not having success at the plate. But somehow he turned it around, perhaps talking with hitting coach Jonathan Matthews, perhaps talking with manager Anthony Contreras, perhaps talking to mom and dad. Joey Cantillo was his roommate until Joey got promoted to Lake Elsinore recently. But since then, you're right, over 50 games, and Blake is really hitting the ball well. I mentioned before we started our chat today, I was fortunate enough to be in South Bend for the 3-game series against the Cubs, and Blake's mom and dad made the trip from California to see son play. Ironically, Blake only played in the first 2 games of that series, but it was great to have that family support. And we're looking at the offensive numbers right now, talking how well he's been hitting, and he had 3 hits last night, including a triple. But look at what he's done defensively behind the plate. We don't often talk about the fact that a catcher's responsibilities is not just taking pitches from a pitcher. It's in essence calling a game. You're to use a football term, you're the quarterback of the team on the diamond. You may get a little bit of help from the dugout, but more often than not, you're making the decision what pitch to call, where you want him to throw it, setting up your infield, setting up your outfield. You have to know every hitter on the opposition, what their tendencies are. That takes time. You also have to know the good things about your fielders, your teammates. And it's no surprise that a lot of successful managers in the major leagues have been former catchers. And I throw a couple out: Joe Torre, Mike Scioscia, look how long he was with the Angels, and many others. But they have to take, in essence, the extra time to get things right, not just for his battery mate, the pitcher, but for the rest of the team defensively. And that takes a lot of time. There's only 24 hours in a day, and it's amazing how much catchers can put together and put a game plan in place in such a short period of time. And Blake has gotten better at that as the season has progressed.
One other guy who I'd like to highlight, because I feel like we haven't mentioned him a whole lot this season, and he deserves mentioning. Mike, I was looking at some numbers for one Michael Curry recently, and honestly, I was a little bit surprised at just how well this guy's been swinging the bat. I mean, you see him out here, and you see him collecting hits, and I mean, you know he's having a pretty good season, but the numbers kind of took me back a little bit. Here's a guy who, since Memorial Day, is top 5 in the league in batting average, on base percentage, runs batted in. I mean, he is quietly putting together a really, really good season here in Low A.
Starting play tonight, he's got a batting average for the season of .283 with 7 home runs. Those are second most on the team, behind the 11 hit by Justin Lopez. 40 runs batted in. And John Nolan and Evan Stockton, who I'm fortunate enough to work with on the radio side, all 3 of us have mentioned how hard Michael Curry swings at a pitch. I mean, I look at him swing at a pitch and I shudder that maybe a rib might be cracked every now and then. But that's his approach. That's the way he feels to do his thing. And he has really hit the ball, as you say, well as of late. And again, that's the good thing on the offensive side. But the Tin Caps have to put all 3 facets of the game together: pitching, hitting, and defense. They can still do it. But again, kudos to Michael Curry and Blake Hunt.
Yeah, so despite what's been a tough season record-wise, still plenty of good stories here on the diamond at Parkview Field, and hopefully those good stories continue for the next week or so. And until then, we're going to get out of here before we get hit by some sprinklers here, because I mean, it is pretty hot. I honestly wouldn't mind a little bit of but I don't want to get soaking wet either. So let's call it a day, shall we?
If you say so, sir.
All right, Mike Moss, Peter Hood, another edition of TinChattin in the books. We'll have more for you next week, and we got more coming up for you in the locker room right after this break.